I'm delighted to introduce my fellow guests. I'm sitting on a cushion, even though I still look incredibly small next to these strapping lads. And I'd just like to start off by introducing Adrian McNally, who's artist in residence for the festival and is one of the unthanks. We're performing in the Spiegel tent later on, and you'll hear a bit more about that later on. But also to my left, I have Greg and Gary, and they are from the Lone Twin Boat Project, which I hope you might have had the opportunity to see in the Centre MK, an incredibly beautiful boat made from pieces of wood and stories that have been donated by from people all over the south coast. And we're going to have a little chat about that and how that has inspired the Stables to commission an album of new music, and inspired to Adrian as artist in residence to work with a whole pile of songwriters to create and produce a new album, which has its official release date today, and had a little bit of a preview on the Lauren Laverne show this morning on Six Music. So it's already starting to get quite a lot of national profile, so we're absolutely delighted. So I think maybe to set the context of this, let me just tell you what an artist in residence does and why we decide to have an artist in residence as part of the festival. When we decided to start producing as a music organisation, an international festival that was not just about music but all sorts of art forms, we were really keen that anchored at the centre of it was the opportunity for an artist to create and to create new work and to be able to bounce ideas off other artists, so to work together, to collaborate, and to come up with new initiatives and ideas that would be a creative resource for them and an opportunity to do that. And in 2010, we worked with a sonic artist called Yannick Schaefer, who did an installation in the old supermarket, Sainsbury's old supermarket down there, with some cars, and he created a sonic landscape. This time round, one of the earliest projects that we started looking at was the Boat Project. Funnily enough, the Boat Project had, when they started talking to us, said, we'd really like you to do something creative in response to the Boat Project. So we started racking our brains, and we thought, the artist in residence idea, it's a perfect opportunity for us as a music venue to commission an album of songs inspired by some of the stories that went into the Boat Project. So I think maybe it'd be good now if the Lone Twin guys could give you a bit of background about the Boat Project itself, how it came about and what it is, because some people might not have seen or heard the full spiel yet.
Yes, so the Boat Project is an Arts Council funded commission for the Cultural Olympiad, and we won the commission back in 2009. Although we've had the idea for the Boat Project for 12 years, in fact. And the date when the boat was launched on the 7th of May this year, it was 12 years to the date that we'd had the idea. And our previous work as Lone Twin has been in the field of performance art and live art. We met at art school, Dartington College of Arts in Devon, if some of you know that school. And as a duo, we made performance art kind of for the first 9 years of working together. Often the performances were in outdoor spaces, sometimes coming inside to galleries and theatres. Often the works were attempts, so it might be a journey, an impossible journey, maybe across a town or through a part of a city. These walking performances were about meeting people in their day, in their business, at their work, and the conversations we had with people about our time there would build the performance that we'd perform to an assembled audience. Often we would find ourselves in cities that have bodies of water, and we started to think about where, as humans, we settled geographically, and often that is near water for obvious reasons. So we started to think about water and ourselves being part of the water cycle. So looking into the materiality of water and what it contains. So a lot of those performances were about meeting water, becoming very local by meeting people and having conversations. And we started to think about boats. We'd finished a performance in Norway, and people it was an 18-hour walking performance. And during that time, we've met most of the town actually. They come and met us and walked with us. we were walking on 2 bridges in Norway, in this particular town. And at the end of the performance, some people who we'd met in the middle of the night at some point came back with some small constructed boats, because we'd had a few conversations about boats on these bridges. Boat building, of course, being a big... it's getting very dramatic now as I'm speaking, the drums starting up. Of course, boat building in Norway being a very big cultural thing, as in this country. So these people have made boats through the night. They'd gone home, a little group of friends. They'd made boats out of bits they found in their house, a lolly stick for a mast, and they brought them back at the end of our performance, knowing our sort of finishing time. And as a little gesture, maybe a little thanks, they launched these boats on the river there, the River Glomma in Norway. We started to think about these objects that surround us, maybe wooden objects, how they have stories attached to them. These little things that the people have made boats from. They told us how they constructed them, where they found them in their house. So that, I guess a little seed was planted there for the boat project, and we hatched this idea of making boats out of objects around us, and how these objects can surface histories and stories, particularly wooden objects, I guess, because it's a material that persists. It's once a tree, and they sort of last for ages. Wood, and it gets morphed and changed into something else. It gets handed down. So there's the early ideas for the boat project 12 years ago, and then the commissions were announced in 2009, and we were shortlisted and won the commission for the South East. Do you want to talk a bit about what's happened?
Yes. So we then basically started asking for pieces of wood. We asked. It was commissioned for the South East, as Gary was saying, so we asked the sort of entire region. It's the Arts Council's understanding of the South East, which includes Milton Keynes and bits of Oxfordshire and all sorts of things. So we did a big call out, got on the radio and TV and press, that sort of stuff, and asked people for pieces of wood. We said we'd take anything of any quality, of any size, a matchstick or like a church roof, or we had all sorts of things, from tiny little things like matchsticks to a pontoon in 700 pieces. So we'd take anything with one stipulation, that it had a story behind it, and that you would turn up and you'd give us this thing, and as you gave it to us, you would tell us sort of what it was, how it featured in your life, what it meant to you or to your family or to your loved ones or colleagues, or what it meant to your city or your town. And variously we started that in January. January 2011, and we did that process for 6 months. We sort of travelled around. We had what we call donation days, which was like the Antiques Roadshow, where we'd pitch up somewhere and people would come and bring us things, and then at the end we'd keep it all. And then we also had our build shed in Emsworth down in Chichester, near Chichester, and Chichester Harbour there. Where people could drop in 5 days a week and give us stuff. And from those bits of stuff, thousands and thousands of things, we started slowly to make the boat that's now in the centre down there. Mark Cavell was the lead boat builder. He's an Olympic sailor and sort of extraordinarily talented boat builder. Simon Rogers, who's a brilliant boat designer, designed the boat. And 4 full-time boat builders, sort of army of volunteers, 90 or so volunteers, without whom the project wouldn't have been possible. Lots of people giving their time and their skills to the project to make it happen.
I was, I have to say, very relieved to see it actually come in one piece after having sailed around the coast. That it actually arrived in Milton Keynes in one post, probably one of the furthest points from the sea.
Yes.
To be craned into the shopping centre at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yes. Yeah, it was always our desire when we started the project, or started to think about what kind of boat we would build, is that it could come inland very easily and put on a trailer very easily. We didn't really want to be sort of locked to the coast or get into sort of logistical things with convoys transporting the boat around. So yeah, it was always an idea. The very first idea, going back all those years, was to build coracles. Our walking performances would suit portable boats, so we'd put a coracle on our back and continue our walk, get into water and get across it. So I think it was always an idea that the boat we would build, whatever shape that would be, whatever type of boat that would be, but it should be very accessible to come inland as well. Just to mention, another part of the original concept was that we'd always keep the stories alive, the stories of the objects. So alongside the boat being built, we've published a book, and that was the original sort of part of the application. So in this book is all 1,221 donations and donation stories and pictures of the donators. So we're very keen to sort of honour those people and those stories, the histories of those objects in the boat. And
it was the stories, wasn't it, Adrian, that trapped you into becoming our artist in residence. I mean, I just to explain, when we came up with this concept of having commissioned an album, we scratched around and thought, who can we get to ask to write an album about a boat and stories, and how are we going to convey that? It was really difficult for me to write the artistic brief to convince you to do it.
Thanks for your explanation of what an artist in residence was earlier, Monica. I wish you'd have told me that 6 months ago.
But the thing that we did was actually, we said, come down and see the boat and meet the guys, listen to some of the stories and see if it's something that actually interests you, which is what you did. You flew down and there was an exchange of stories and a looking at things. And just talk us through that process, your first impressions of seeing the boat.
Yeah,
and the process.
hello everybody. It certainly made a big difference actually going down and seeing the boat. You know, you get told about an idea and it all seems a bit kind of dry on paper and no pun intended. And
None taken.
Seeing the boat being built and just being shown various bits of wood and being told the stories behind them, made me realise that for as much as a splendid thing has been built in this boat, what it really is a modern exercise in storytelling. It's an opportunity for people who have treasured possessions to favour parting with them in favour of sharing that story rather than it going to the grave with them. And it's also an opportunity for people with treasured items that might in some respect be a token of somebody that's gone or of a part in their life that's significant to them, as opposed to that piece of wood disappearing or kind of being lost in over time, that it's gone into something that will be, that will treasure that memory or honour that person or whatever forevermore. So I'd like to congratulate these guys for such a fantastic idea. It's I think it shows us all, hopefully, that in these times that we live in the cult of personality, when it's all about I and not we, that's sharing and human empathy and capacity for learning and wisdom by sharing each other's experiences is still what makes us the people that we are.
And I remember being in tears actually, because you told one of the stories about, it was the little figurine from Easter Island. Do you want to just briefly touch on that story? Because that was one of the ones we all went, and I think you said at the time, I might keep some of these stories for myself rather than pass them on.
There's loads more albums in this bunch. I tell you, only just got started, man.
Yeah. So the woman who donated this little figurine, in fact, there's a picture of it somewhere. So she's Lady Pippa Blake, and she's the widow of Sir Peter Blake, who's a famous New Zealand sailor. Sort of America's Cup and things like that. But he was killed by pirates. I'm going to get the date wrong, so I say about 10 years ago or more even. And on a journey back from New Zealand to the UK, Pippa and Peter stopped off in Easter Island just for a few hours, and just got some souvenirs from that place. They bought 2 of these little figures, the sort of classic-looking Easter Island figurines, and she's had the 2 figurines sitting on the mantelpiece, and she's brought one of them down to us, and now that's inside the cuddy of the boat where people sleep, and the other figurine's still with her on the mantelpiece. So that's just an example, of a really generous, a really incredible sort of sentimental object, really marking their relationship in that particular time. But the gesture to give that over and for it to be part of our boat is really unfathomable, really. And
remember, after we went down to the boat shed, Adrian and I talked with you about how we could filter this in a way for the approaches to the artists, because just to give them 1,300 stories was going to be too much, and you came up with a selection of stories that you thought we could then offer out to the artists. I think there was about 100 out of that. How did you select those?
Musicians have a very short attention span.
Yeah.
We just there were stories bounding around in the boat shed. Each new sort of van load that came back from the donation day and was unpacked in front of the boat builders, and explaining what certain objects were. And there's ones that sort of stay with you, or it became familiar or useful stories to tell in terms of examples of types of story or types of objects or types of reasons why people were perhaps given us objects or connections to the project. So I think it was just just a sort of collection of scale of objects, of where they came from in the region, of the type of maybe ideas that those objects threw up from it being sort of simple planks. I know there's a track on the album about some planks from a shed, just sort of very quite anonymous looking planks from this garden shed, to very loaded, very obvious, objects which are kind of connected to people. So I think it was just sort of a cross section. Really.
We were always quite careful with the with sort of presenting selections, because there are objects that are sort of really notable in a sort of national way. But so much of what the boat's built of is actually sort of these much smaller, quieter, mundane things, these sort of very everyday parts of life that have been a part of a life or a family's life for a long time, or as Adrian said, sort of marked somebody's passing. And so a lot of we're often sort of taking care in making sure that we present sort of those bits that on this, sort of on a quick read on the sort of the most interesting ones, but actually they are, I think, they're the things that sort of they're the markers of everyday life in some way.
And Adrian, when we started pulling together, we had to do something similar, which was pull together a short list of artists to approach, and there was a kind of combined effort. We pushed some people at youth that were, I would call Stable's friends, i.e. people that we'd known and worked with in various capacities. And you similarly put forward people that you either wanted to work with or people that you had worked with that you felt that would be really good storytellers. Just tell us a little bit about the approaches to the artists and maybe some of their concerns as well about the representation of those stories.
Well, basically, I asked lots of people, and all my favourites said no, and so we ended up with the ones that we've got.
They're over there. I was just, by the way.
No, it was a real treat, really, to draw up a shortlist and an opportunity for me to work with people that I admire, and then opportunity for people I never imagined I'd work with in terms of some of the people that Monica's team suggested. Guy Chambers, for instance, who wrote all Robbie Williams' hits, is probably the most successful, wealthiest British songwriter in the last 20 years, I imagine. I gather he was a friend of the Stables on account of going to some...
He went to our music camps as a kid.
Yeah, he went to
something... Which is really interesting. Our music camps have just started this week.
Oh,
we run them every year for 3 weeks. And I was up there today looking at them, thinking, which one of you is the next Guy Chambers? Get my eyes on you.
Yeah, so he's been sort of giving back ever since, because he was inspired by that. As a might paint a portrait of someone that the sitter is horrified by, but if that's what the artist sees, then that's what the artist sees. And so some songwriters took these songs literally and tried to tell the story, and others took it as a starting point and took it off in a completely different direction.
And how much interaction did you have throughout that process, Adrian? Because it was all done in a very short table, really, because of your other unthanks commitments and your other recording commitments and touring commitments and having a small child and illness and all of those things. It was a bit of a torrid sort of few months, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, and it was it was a short time scale for the songwriters as well, and so some went away and came back with the finished product without any more say in the matter. But that was always the starting point for me. Even when the song was finished, my job was just beginning as an arranger. But there were others. In some cases, some of the most mature, experienced, and one would assume most confident songwriters were some of the most communicative and Ralph McTell, for instance, he was constantly back and forth about ideas and on the phone, and I'm worried about this and what do you think to this, and you wouldn't have thought there would be anyone more assured after all this time, which was a real pleasure to find that he was so open to collaboration and so unassuming about his own talents.
And not all of the tracks are singer-songwriters, are there? There are some artists who are. It's a collaboration between a writer and you.
Yeah, well, there are two tracks that are marked as being by the Unthanks on the record, and the words to those songs were by the author Nick Hornby and the poet Ian McMillan, respectively. And it was really fun working with those two. Nick Hornby was, I think we're all big fans of. He wrote a song about a simple ruler that was donated by a chap who was beaten with this ruler at school and stole it from his mistress before he left school. I think Nick had some similar experiences at school, which he hadn't forgotten, and wrote that song, which turned into my debut lead vocal performance in the Unthanks, embarrassingly. And Ian McMillan wrote some words to a story that came from some small chippings of wood that came from a tree that were made by bullets that were fired on the set of the film The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, which was filmed in Spain. And I set the music sort of very loosely to the famous theme tune to Good, Bad and the Ugly. It sounds better than I said.
Which sent me into a panic about rights, I have to say.
Yeah, and Ian's we didn't turn his words into a song. He speaks his poetry to the music. Ian got the glamorous Unthanks treatment and was put under our stairs at home on our farm. We record our vocals under the stairs.
And you recorded in lots of studios, didn't you?
We did, yeah. Some were more glamorous and entirely legit, yeah.
And including one track at the stables.
One track at the stables, artist in
Probably
residence for one track.
Yeah. which was Hannah Millett's Extraordinary, the song about the conjurers.
It is extraordinary, yeah. It's very difficult to play. We've been rehearsing it this afternoon for tonight.
Hear a bit for tonight.
We, me and Hannah arrived at the studio in Milton Keynes, and she'd sent me a demo of it already, which contained some piano playing, which I assumed that she'd played. Hannah's a cello player, actually, but most classically trained musicians sort of grow up playing the piano as well, right? So I assumed it was her. She assumed that I would play it for her. So we spent the first 3 hours of that recording session with me learning the piano part.
For a 6.5 minute song.
In all its many keys for 6.5 minutes, yeah. Which I enjoyed very much.
The longest track on the album.
It is.
Just in terms of the track listings and the selection of the artists and how you selected that, talk us through that process. Did you do that at the end? Or do you have it how you selected how the tracks are listed on the album?
The order?
Mm-hmm.
It's always decided at the end for me, regardless of what album I'm making. I mean, sometimes you get a feeling earlier on what's going to start the record and what have you. But yeah, there was certainly no hierarchy in terms of the most famous or whatever. I was just trying to make a record that made sense, and that was one of the most challenging aspects of the commission. Really, to make an album that had any degree of coherence sonically through it, especially as it being recorded in so many different places. I could get all geeky on you about how difficult that is, but that was one of the most enjoyable elements, really, to try and get a thread through it. And I did try and use similar musicians, the same musicians on as many tracks as I could, so that the colours that I was using would flavour the tracks throughout, and hopefully create something that sounded like one piece, even though it was by lots of different songwriters.
It's been called a concept album.
Oh God.
The press seem to be calling it a concept album. In fact, I read one review that said it's despite the bizarre subject matter, it is one of the greatest concept albums of all time, which I thought was marvellous.
Something that I thought that I did read that I thought was nice was somebody wrote that how often when artists are asked to contribute to albums like this, where they get a track on an album and there's some common theme, that they often hold back their best material because they don't have enormous amount to benefit from it, and they'll submit something, but they're not going to give you their best tune, and how this album was anything but that in terms of the degree of quality on it. So that was nice.
There was one, we won't mention names, but there was one artist who did submit something which didn't make it onto the album because it didn't quite sit within the rest of the way that you were conceiving it. Nothing to do with the quality of the track that was submitted, but it just didn't work. And there was an editorial, therefore, process. It wasn't a question of just taking everything that we were given.
Not at all. I felt it was a failure on my part, really. It was a perfectly good song, and in some ways so extraordinary. The vocal performance particularly was quite singular. It's quite odd, but in a good way. I just really couldn't work out what to do with it, how to match it, how to bring out the best in it. And in the end, I had to concede within the time structure that we had that it was too much, to bite off and have a go at.
And you guys have had a little bit of that process as well in terms of fitting all the little items.
Oh,
I mean,
God,
you had so much wood to get into that little boat.
Yeah. Yes, so there was editing, but only, our pledge when someone brought us something was that we would use a piece of their item, their wood, in the boat. So, like the pontoon that Greg mentioned, or wardrobes that turned up, or huge bits of oak pulled out of a canal in Guildford. We could use a part of those. So there was an editing process, and also a process whereby, if some of you have seen the boat, the outside of the boat, the top sides, is all about sort of colour and shape. The inside of the boat is much more colourful, and it's got carvings as well. So there was decisions on where certain objects were used, and things, big structural, hefty bits of wood lent themselves to be structural parts in the boat, whereas smaller bits of balsa were always going to sit on the outside and be sandwiched with the epoxy resin. So we didn't necessarily, nothing was rejected unless it wasn't wood, but there was a sort of whole process that the boat builders went through, and as I said, they were watching things coming in week by week, so I think they were making little decisions where things would go. Mark, who led the build, is an Olympian from Sydney in 2000, and he was really intent on getting the rings on the boat sort of under the radar, as it were, knowing the sort of furore around using that symbol. But there was a rolled piece of mast that came in, a rolled veneer mast, hollow mast, and I think he sort of clocked that straight away and thought that's where if I slice that into little rings, I can inlay that, and that's what he's done on the main hatch. So there was an editing process and a sort of selection process, and like the album, sort of making it a coherent object to look at. And at points it looks completely bonkers, but there is a commonality to them all being wood, and a common kind of aesthetic to the sort of viewpoints of it.
And there's a lot of instruments in the boat. There's a lot of guitars, recorders, violins.
Yeah.
And you've sort of you've kind of made there's an extraordinary. There's a violin with a recorder neck.
Yes.
I seem to recall.
Yeah. Some of them look like kind of strange cubist sort of or surreal arrangements, and that's one of the lovely things about all these objects sort of swashing around together like Flotsam and Jetsam. They create these little collections of things and things gathered together, and that was sort of down to the boat builders. We didn't lead that design in any particular way. We laid it out, and there was a conversation about maybe grouping some things together just because there were multiple objects, there were loads of tennis rackets, and how do you deal with these sort of multiple items or collections of things, and just a sort of a hint or a gesture towards some sense of design or aesthetic in terms of laying things in diagonal stripes or the hockey sticks together. But we really left it down to the boat builder's own sort of rules, really, and the rules we offered them were that of dry stone walling, where if you pick up a stone, you've got to find the place where it goes rather than put it back down and find the sort of right stone, because you're there all day trying to build the wall. So when they picked up an object, they had to find where they felt it fitted on the boat, and we'd be down the shed periodically, for a long weekend, and come back 3 or 4 days later, and they couldn't hang around for us to come back, so they just cracked on with the boat. And there's obviously a million ways those things could have gone on the side, but that seems right because that is how the boat builder put them there. And
the great thing about it being in Central Quay in Milton Keynes is that you can really take your time and look at it up close, because it's not, it's that watching, listening, and feeling and touching.
I've been there for the last 4 days now, and we've had some people come back each day to sit down and sort of contemplate a new section of the boat, or find things, or maybe they've bought a book and gone away and read some things, and they've come back to find those objects on the boat. So it's like a great album, it sort of requires multiple viewings and listenings and musings.
Can I ask you to a question?
Yeah.
There's a song on the album by a young Australian artist called Sarah Blasco, who her track was played on Lauren Laverne this morning on Six Music, about a small thrift box, which was something that was given to a gentleman when he was a boy in the war, to encourage the idea of thrift in children, of being careful with what you got and of saving and so on. And this thrift box has a small, is it a 2 shilling piece?
Yeah.
A 2 shilling piece in a hidden part of the box that you can only access by pressing the right bit or whatever. And the donator wondered whether, although this boat had to be made of wood, whether they'd keep the 2 shilling piece in the boat.
It's under the mast, isn't it? Yeah, it's under the mast. So
did they keep it in?
Yeah, it's traditional when you're building a boat to put a coin of some age, a sort of antique coin under the mast for look, I imagine. And
just the job then.
It's there. It's there. Yeah, that was a great little thing with a great little sort of motto on the front about how one should live one's life. And the guy said, it was given to me, just after the war, and it was a time of austerity, and we lived our lives by it. That's, thrift, and we'd remake things and reuse things, and it has a nice sort of echo with the boat, I suppose.
Right. There's been lots of little echoes throughout this whole project, hasn't there? I think it's probably time to maybe hear one or two of the tracks.
Okay.
I'd quite like you to maybe introduce Ravenin as well, in terms of how you met Ravenin.
Excellent. Okay. Perhaps while I'm doing so, you guys, you can get your dobro out, Ray.
We'll probably just nip off the stage and let you do this bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Perfect.
Perhaps a round of applause for the boat project, guys. So we're going to have a very intimate pared down performance of the opening track from the album Harbour of Songs. The song is written by Guy Chambers, and this song came about in a slightly different way to the rest, in that Guy kind of got the wrong end of the stick initially. He didn't send me a demo; he sent me the finished item. It was full pop production. And I sent him an email. I said, "Oh, that sounds great, Guy, but maybe you didn't quite have the concept explained to you properly. It's kind of supposed to be a collaboration." And he was, yeah, that's fine. Sorry, you're right. I didn't realise. Take from it what you want. Keep these bits, lose that bit, start again. I'm just precious about the song, and you could do anything. Whatever you want to do with it, it's fine. So I did keep some of his tracks and lost some of the others. It had a female singer on it already, and who was great. But I said to him, is this someone? Who is this girl? Is it someone that might stand to benefit from this exposure? And actually, it turned out to be a session musician who just moved to New York, and come this point, she wouldn't have been able to contribute or benefit from it. So I invited this young lady to sing the song instead, which I'm extremely pleased I did. We met Raven on a residency we did in Manchester in February of last year. We were invited by Band on the Wall in Manchester to host an event whereby young and up-and-coming musicians were invited to come and play with us. 200 people applied, and we selected 12. She was one of them, and all week she stood out a mile from the rest. And my job that week was to sort of explore their songs with them and perhaps bring out something new in their music and sort of guide them in any way that we could. We had lots of fun, but the best thing I could do for her, I realised, was just to leave her alone. And we, whereas everyone else's tracks, all the other artists played on everyone else's tracks, we just let Ray play on her own. And she was better for it that way. And that's an interesting thing about arrangement in itself. Sometimes the best thing you can do to a song is just to leave well alone. And it's important to, when you've got lots of fancy musicians at your disposal, to not to be tempted to use them indiscriminately. We're going to have a little acoustic intimate performance. You'll see this later on with a full string quartet, drums, double bass and everything. But this is just Ray and Chris. How are you guys doing? Right, okay. Oh, this takes me back.
I might need it over the side. Might need it on that side if that's right. Thank you. I'm only small. Fantastic. Thank you.
So please welcome Raven and the Spanders.
Thank you. Can you build a house of wood? Some wings so I can fly. A garden by a brook, so we can run and hide. Find me a ring of gold, a rim of amethyst. One day we'll both be old, and tomorrow won't exist. Can I make this up for you with paper and some glue? Can I make this up for you we'll make a fire inside. Can I make this up for you with paper and some glue? Can I make this up for you? Can you make a house of wood? Some wings so I can fly. A garden by a brook where we can run and hide.
Thanks, guys. We're going to let Ray play one of her own songs later tonight as well. So if you enjoyed that, you can hear actually some of her own material as well. We've just got one more song for you, which will be Johnny Kearney, aided by our thanks string quartet. We'll be right with you. That one.
Oh, cool. Hello. Hello. All right. Yes. So my song's about a piece of wood. It was a Sri Lankan mask, and it was used to exorcise demons, apparently. And I just started trying to write quite a literal song about it, and I struggled, so it just turned into something quite tenuous, but it meant something to me, and hopefully to the donator as well. But I hope you enjoy it. Yeah.
I think we'll just leave the quartet acoustic. Yeah. Right, girls. Okay, so Johnny Kearney, everybody.
There's a face that you wear, it keeps hidden. All the thoughts, all the feelings inside. There's a place you've been running to hide, where no one will find you. All around you they're choosing these churches, but you can't bear to make a mistake. For the lights that are leading their way, they're only pretending. Everybody has something they're scared of. Everybody will be carried away. The things you've been wanting to say will come out eventually. So reveal you, not within you, but without you. Not so careful, be gracious, be kind. The things you've been wanting to find, you'll get there eventually. You'll get there eventually. you. Thanks very much.